I'm so excited to be here again this year. What a great set of conversations so far, am I right? Yay, yes. Summer is one of the best times to be in New York City, in my opinion, and it's my favorite because it showcases the creativity, culture, and imagination of New Yorkers and the world, all within an incredible backdrop like this space, the Glass House, in New York City. As mentioned, my name, well, maybe not, it wasn't mentioned, I'm imagining it being mentioned. My name is Sonia Park, and I lead the creative portfolio at New York City's Economic Development Corporation. We create economic opportunity for New Yorkers through placemaking, our assets, and our programs. And we're here because, like the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, we see a huge opportunity to make New York City a hub for digital games, alongside many of our top-tier creative industries, like film and TV, music, fashion, creative expression, and narrative building. You name it, and if it's a creative industry, New York City is a leader. So come hear more about what we do tomorrow morning at the opening sessions, but also throughout the day. And hit me up on the app if you want to connect to hear more about what my day-to-day is at the EDC. But on to why we're here today. As part of our efforts to make New York City a games hub, we invested in a games incubator with NYU Tandon a couple of years ago. We saw that the games community in New York City is growing, and we wanted to be a part of that growth. And our incubator has seen some exciting progress, and applications are open now for the second cohort. So you can find more information about what we do at edc.nycec/digital/games. So that's my PSA and lead up to our conversation. Thank you for everyone sitting here and all of your patience. I'm excited to keep the momentum of these great conversations going. We work to create this panel and bring insights from all these incredible experts on how to navigate funding in this challenging time, because we know that the challenge is real. If you'd like to meet the panelists, hit them up on the app to make an appointment. Also, our incubator cohort will be in the step-out space to the left. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Digital Games Incubator Director, Mitu Khandaker, who's going to guide us through how games are getting funded. That's right. Yay, Mitu. Who's going to guide us through how games are getting funded in 2026. And big thank you to everyone on stage for being a part of the panel, for the Games for Change team, as well as Emily Metten, who made this partnership possible. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Mitu.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Sonia. Okay, so welcome to the Love is Blind reunion. I'm Nick Lachey. Sorry, I made that joke like 3 times backstage. Hi, everybody. So I'm Mitu Khandaker. So I am the director of the NYC Game Design Future Lab. So I've been super honored to work with our founders in the incubator, some of which you'll meet here today. And, I'm someone who, I've spent like 2 decades working in games. I've been on both sides of the table, kind of, when it comes to, like, raising funding. Like, I've tried to, I've done the, like, raising money thing. I've done the, like, evaluating other people's, like, pitches thing. And it's a really hard space, right? And so we wanted to sort of represent that conversation here on stage today and kind of bring to you, like, what is the actual landscape of trying to raise funding, raise investment in the game space in 2026, because one of the things that we know about the space is that it just changes really rapidly, and there's like different trends, etc. Before we dive into things, raise your hand if you're somebody who is trying to raise funding for a game or game company right now. Okay, great. So hopefully this is going to be a super relevant conversation to many of you. And so before we dive in, and I know we've got a lot, we don't have a ton of time for this big and complex topic, so we're going to dive in. We do have an amazing, esteemed panel that we put together. So I'm going to just ask everybody to introduce themselves real quick. We'll start on this side with Ben over here. And if you could just introduce yourself super briefly and the kind of, the perspective that you're coming to this discussion.
Sure. I'm Ben Kvalo, founder, CEO of Midwest Games. I am coming from a perspective of trying to challenge the publishing ecosystem and look at new models, new ways of working, and new places of working. We're based in Wisconsin, the publishing hub of the world. And we are really thinking about how do we build better ecosystems, bring this industry to more places, and really challenging the existing model. The traditional publishing model is in a tough place. And there's a lot of other ways we can work, and I'm fortunate to have come from a long history of being in the publishing end with 2K, Blizzard, and then was at Netflix helping to build their films division and then their games division from the ground up.
Cool. I'm Alex. I run platform revenue and gaming partnerships at a company called Metal and General Intuition. Metal, if you haven't heard of it, is the game's largest clipping platform where players, not just creators, come and share their gaming moments and memories with friends in the same way that you use Snapchat to maybe share a funny-looking bird that you saw on the street. But probably what's most relevant for me is that before I was at Metal, I raised a round of venture capital from a publisher called Krafton. I had been running a video game studio with a bunch of founders for the past 3 years, building a AAA, AA cooperative shooter. And so have kind of gone through the tour of duty of raising money before in the venture capital gaming landscape.
And you were a VC as well, right?
I was also a VC as well, so I have experience on the investing side. And I've been lucky enough to actually spend a lot of time with Mitu. I sit on the board and the advisory cohort for the incubator that she's currently running, which is amazing. Yeah, that's
We're super happy to have you here today. And then Matthew.
Hey, so I'm Matthew Cohen. I'm an agent in games at Creative Artists Agency. I'm based in Los Angeles, but I grew up in New York. I have also been various parts of this industry, from working in the film and TV industry to start to having a startup game development studio. I worked at Machinima. But for the last 10 years, I've been at Creative Artists Agency primarily helping studios figure out how to get funding and distribution.
Awesome. And then the final two folks, before they introduce themselves, are a couple of our founders representing two of the companies in the first cohort of the Games Design Future Lab right now. So Peter, if you want to go ahead first.
Hi, I'm Peter Larson Schmidt. I'm a professional animator and I'm a co-founder of CYBERLICH Studios. Just happy to be here. It's really cool to be part of the GDFL incubator. Mitu does a great job.
Thank you, Peter. And then Krystel.
Yeah, hi, I'm Krystel Theuvenin. I'm one of the worker owners and founders of the cooperative studio Munity Games, working on an arcade game, coming from the perspective of being a games educator and then fully diving into this and learning so much, and really thankful for the program and all the perspective it's given us.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Round of applause for our panelists for being here. Okay, so we're going to try and do the thing of defining the funding landscape. Because when we say funding for games and games companies, it can mean, there's a lot of different types of buckets that can mean, right? So there's you might know just in general terms, there's project funding for your game versus equity funding for your studio. And that just begins to scratch the surface of the ways you can go about it, right? So I want to throw over to our panelists to talk a little bit about the things that they're seeing from their perspective when it comes to the different types of buckets that exist. There's also grants, et cetera. So Ben, I want to throw over to you because you started talking a little bit about traditional publishing, how you're kind of disrupting your way of doing that. So do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so I think we have to first go back and, a lot of people don't really understand what publishing is. Publishing is a mix of 40 plus different disciplines to help get something to market, help support. I see it as a support mechanism, but there's obviously a piece of it that goes into the funding of games. And traditionally, that was on the publisher end. And really, it was until about 2016 when venture money and other funding routes came in, it kind of disrupted and changed how people look at approaching things. And publishers, at that point started to look, well, why do I take the risk involved with early stage funding? Because there's a tremendous amount of risk. And a publisher is really about mitigating risk and thinking about a portfolio of titles. And so that has all shifted, where publishing is taking less risks in early stage. And the early stage is being replaced either by just simply bootstrapping or other mechanisms, grants, project funding, some of the ones mentioned. And publishers have moved more towards late stage publishing, or that's what I'm seeing in the environment right now. So like how you engage is you're not gonna do it through one big box anymore. And even the big box, ironically, like my company, publishers are outsourcing their publishing to us to help support them. So the publishing ecosystem I see becoming much more modular, and I think that kind of modular ecosystem is evolving and growing and changing in real time. And I compare it in some ways to like the films industry and how the films industry evolved into what it is today, more project-based work, more ways of working with more groups involved, which adds complication and requires like groups like us to be like a central facilitator and connector between many different groups.
And then, Matthew, I want to throw over to you because I think your perspective I always find really interesting as someone who you speak to like multiple founders and multiple funders, right? So you have that sort of in-between perspective. Does that sort of gel with what you've seen in the last?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there still is a AAA publishing space that either publishes games based on pre-existing franchising, increasingly pre-existing franchises, or occasionally will launch something and take early stage risk. But it's becoming more and more rare, right, and refined and specialized. And then you have, you certainly also have platforms, right, like Xbox and Nintendo that fund games specifically for their platforms. And then you have sort of mid-tier publishers, and then you have indie publishers. Each of them have a different flavor. The most important thing I think going into this, if you're making a game, is like, who is this for, right? Like in terms of the funders, like who should you be approaching, and which people are just not really relevant, right? You can go to a show like Gamescom or GDC, and you can shotgun blast your game like, hey, this thing's really cool, and I want everyone to see it. But you're wasting a lot of time, primarily your own, if you're not thinking about, hey, like this is my genre, this is my budget level, this is who might be most interested in it. But I think the most important thing that Ben's saying is that what's happened over the last 3-4 years is that we have moved into a space where it's not usually a single source that is funding your game. It is usually a collaboration between, again, bootstrapping, outside funding, friends and family, getting you to a place where then you can bring in other partners, and those partners might not just be, it might just not just be a publisher taking over and saying, hey, we're doing everything now. It might be a publisher plus a financial vehicle of some sort. So it has gotten a little bit, I say like it went from easy mode to hard mode, right, in terms of it. And this is cyclical, right? I think the other thing to understand is that there are eras within the game industry where funding flows in and things are easy, and it's very clear what people want. But right now, it's a little bit harder, and it's also discoverability, as another thing I think everyone probably in this room is worried about if you're making a game. That's really impacting how people think about what they want to pick up.
I'll put a pin in that because that's something I want to come back to as like obviously something that's super important in this discussion. Alex, I want to go to you for the sort of the idea of like venture funding for your game or your company. Can you speak to that from your experience on both sides of the table there?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Ben said is right. In around 2016, 2017, venture capital as a financial asset class got pretty interested in investing in games content where they traditionally did not play. They played that thesis out for approximately maybe a decade, 8 years or so. What they eventually found out was that gaming, most of the time, doesn't actually contain the venture scale returns that actually make the financial asset applicable for most of their funds. And I think
sometimes it's like 100x or something.
Right, yeah. They don't want you to make a game that sells 5 million units. They need you to build Riot, right? Yeah. And that's not easy, one. And two, like a lot of the companies that end up doing that benefit not just from making an amazing game with a great IP, but they're benefiting from some astronomical distribution edge, free to play, mobile, something like that. We think about Dream or Riot or even ABK back in the time, a heavy consolidation by a really big business leader rolling up a bunch of games that can consistently ship COD 1, COD 2, COD 3 every year. It's not just about making a great game, and I think that venture capital has essentially retreated from that landscape because they realize, well, if you're an investor and you're trying to make money, you can't make money here. And I think the other thing, I think many of you guys raised your hand, that you said that you're looking for games financing in some capacity. The other thing that has really changed for you is in the past, right, you had this publisher group, this kind of 40 disciplines, as you mentioned, that would come and help you get to market after you made your game. The difference also in terms of why there's a big disparity between venture being an appropriate financing vehicle for games is that venture capital treats the company, that means building the product, building the team, getting it to market, starting a business model, making money as one package, right? And traditionally games has always been, I make the game, I don't think about go-to-market, I don't think about discoverability, and then I go find my publisher who's gonna go do that for me. And so the expectation for you in the audience today is not that you can just make your game, but that you have to be truly an entrepreneur. You can't be a game designer, you can't be a game developer. You have to be an entrepreneur and a founder and think about your game as a business in the same way that someone who is starting a consumer SaaS company would think about CAC to LTV, would think about their marketing budget, would think about channel strategy and how to get the product actually in the hands of users. And so I think that's also, what has changed is that venture capital came in, set that expectation, then realized all of these game developers and game designers aren't typically used to thinking like that. And then you run out of money before you can even actually distribute or launch the game, which is, I think my experience from having done it deployed it and also raised it.
They didn't, the VCs didn't plan for that, right? Like
No.
they had this expectation but didn't plan for that back half. Now I think what's happened, to your point though, is that expectation remains. It has not shifted away. Like it's not like, oh, now we can just go back to just thinking about the video game. It's like, no, you, from the beginning, now the expectation is I have to think about all of that life cycle and I need to raise money for that whole life cycle, which is again where the publisher, you're going to publishers and they're asking you things like, what's your go-to-market plan? Again, things that like a few years ago, people wouldn't have even asked you that question. They'd be like, no, we'll figure that out for you.
So that segues to the next part of the question, which is, what stage do games need to be at now in order for deals to actually get signed? Like, is it just having like a go-to-market, or is it already having some huge social proof points around like audience numbers and things like that? Like in terms of things that you're signing, for instance, Ben, what is it you're looking for a game project?
Traction. Some kind of traction. It could be internal data based off of user testing, based off of what, if you can prove out that you can retain a user over a long period of time, like that's a great metric. And you can do that both publicly, you can do that privately.
Okay.
And so looking for data points. And so, for somebody that's building, you have to treat it like you're a startup founder where you might bootstrap to start, you might do some pre-seed, you might do seed, series A, you have to think about it as a step-by-step. You're not gonna unlock everything all at once. And then for us, we don't do as much funding because it's risky. It's so incredibly risky, and it's an iteration business. I wanna see people make 5 games, and it's probably the 5th game that is gonna actually take off. And so how do you set yourself up to be able to build over a longer period of time, knowing if you try to just put all your eggs into one basket, all the data shows you will fail. And frankly, the data sucks in our industry. And that's one of the big challenges is you see on LinkedIn all this BS saying, oh, do these things and you're gonna succeed. And the survival bias is extreme, when in reality, no, don't. You find your own path. That is your best opportunity, but you have to build it step by step by step and look at your different opportunities and look outside the box. I raised venture capital as a publisher, and the irony of what I was raising was I kept being told from VCs that were investing in games and content, oh yeah, I wouldn't invest in a publisher, even though a publisher goes public, sells,
Yeah.
understands the business.
It's more of
like
that model,
makes
right?
way more sense, and also takes 50% of every deal that they're doing, and takes long-term rights, which all create greater value over a longer period of time that hits the venture scale that they're looking for. And so I think we're just in like a reset moment of like, how do we get dollars in the right ways for our style, knowing that we have a disrupted system and we're essentially in this chaos moment that we're creating the way that we're going to work over the next 20 years right now, and it's hard to see outside the chaos. But people are trying new things right now, and that's what's really exciting about this moment, is that there is so much opportunity to try something new, to build something new, and off of that, I think we're going to see like new companies pop up and come out of nowhere and be dominant entities because they're doing something so outside the traditional box, and it works, and people want to like engage in it.
So, so traction you mentioned. So it can be that if people are just like staying and playing your game is really sticky, or it can be like you've already got this big pre-built audience, perhaps. Matthew, does that gel with kind of what you've seen as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, and Ben really covered the quantitative part of it, so I'll go to the qualitative. I mean, fun always cuts through still, right? I mean, this is a medium about, people having fun and like having an incredible experience. When I first saw your game, it stopped me in my tracks because it had an incredible look that I'd never seen before, right? So there are, you have to think about what are the things that cut through, right? Like what are the things that make sure that like, all right, this is going to be some audience is gonna buy this on day one, right? And why are they gonna buy it on day one? You have to be able to articulate that. And that jibes with everything we're saying, right? You can take that lens and go, okay, well, that means it's fun. That means it's distinctive. That means it has a defined audience. That means it's sticky. That means it, like all those things can go through, like boil it down to who is this for and why do they want it, right? And if you can do that from all these different vectors, then you have something, right? And if you can then present that cleanly and clearly and quickly to somebody within an environment like this, that's how you start to break the ice and have these conversations.
And I would also add, like, how are you going to reach them? That's a critical one. Okay, it's fun. Great. Like, there are a lot of games that are fun. The 18,000 games are on Steam right now. I bet you I can find one that's fun, that has meaningfully distinctive art style, that has meaningful narrative, that moves you. Like, there's a lot of games. It's about how are you going to reach them? What is your channel strategy? What kind of grassroots marketing new novel thing are you going to try? Are you going to piggyback on some sort of like large influencer who you believe can kingmake your game? Are you going to do the grassroots approach of, I'm going to get 1,100 follower creators to cover my game? Is my game very clippable, which is like what we focus on at Metal, which is like let the audience clip the game, right? Like they'll find the moments that are worth highlighting. Are you targeting like a meaningfully distinctful new audience that typically doesn't play games or think of themselves as new gamers? If so, how are you going to reach them? And then also like very much needs to be part of a strategy, because it's not enough to be like the game is fun and it is interesting, because there are, unfortunately or fortunately, there are so many games that are fun and interesting.
Well, and I think a key to this is there are tools out there that you can use. There are teams. There are plenty of people that can give you advice. Like, trying to go it alone is so incredibly tough because there's so much perspective, and knowledge degrades at a faster rate than ever before. So even if somebody put out a game 2 years ago, that does not mean that they know how to put out a game today. Like, it is really important to be up to date. So talk to people that have recently done it. And like, it's a key to our entire formula as a company is we always want to be in market because we want to understand what is happening, because it is changing so rapidly, and you have to be careful with who you get advice from. But I highly encourage you to get advice from others and work with other teams, other tools. Jester we use a lot as well. Like, there's a lot of different tools and opportunities that you can use that will help you kind of build that audience.
Yeah, I think one of the fallacies of the sort of VC model was that they kind of came in and were like, again, you have to do it all yourself. Like you have to be self-contained, don't listen to anyone else, you're the founder, everything's singular. And this is a collective medium, and so I think you do need real support. Now, I think advice is great. What I think we really want to look for is people who are going to do something, right? So it's like, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing, and I'm going to like take an action to actually contribute to your success. But if people are willing to do that, like that's listen to that, like look for that, try to find that, build that team around you that can help you be successful.
How important are wish lists right now?
I just record. Oh, another thing I do is I run a games industry podcast. So I actually just covered the topic of PC performance marketing with an amazing company called AdZap. If everybody here should check it out. The founder is trying to build essentially the equivalent of what exists in mobile performance, right? Which is kind of like I target a very specific user with a very specific eCPI or DCPI with the expectation that they will generate some sort of LTV in my game. Obviously, mobile games are mostly free to play. PC games are mostly pay gated. But there's some interesting strategy things to learn. Their campaigns are actually not focused on the install in the same way that mobile performance marketing is focused on the install. They're focused on like performance wish listing. So like $1 per wish list, 75 cents per wish list, et cetera. I mean, and I just had this debate with him. From a personal ethical perspective, especially having gone through running a studio for 3 years where I felt like I was arbitrarily forced to chase KPIs that actually aren't meaningful. My big Discord that eventually everyone goes and mutes because nobody doesn't mute a big Discord, right? So the bigger it is, the more it gets muted, which is terrible as a studio if you want to talk to your audience. I'm supposed to have big social channels, right? I'm supposed to have wish lists, but in reality, I want them to buy my game. So it's an intermediary KPI that is supposed to be an indicator that you're moving in a direction, but it's not really the KPI that you actually want. And what that can lead is to a lot of false confidence, false precision, and paying for the wrong things ultimately. However, his argument back to me was that there is no other thing, right? And that is, unfortunately, Steam is the storefront that runs the majority of discoverability as we see it now. Wishlist is an important component in that black box algorithm that you're constantly trying to defeat, figure out, navigate, whatever word you want to use. And so you have to think about it. It's a sad thing, but it is the KPI that you have to think about because there is no other KPI pre-launch, essentially.
Right, and I think that's the thing. Like wish lists vary in importance over time because Steam changes the criterion by whether they're surfaced or like what happens in a sale. And then that goes to Ben's point of needing to be on the platform all the time because it's not even, there are these shifts in one direction, it might shift in the other direction and you don't even know that happened, right? There's no external dashboard that Steam puts out saying, this is what we're doing to the algorithm, So it's, and that applies to all the platforms, by the way, it's not just Steam. Everyone kind of jumps on Steam because it's a large platform, it has a lot to do with where the conversation is happening around games today. But the point is you can succeed on multiple platforms. You don't have to just only index on this one. But right now it drives the conversation.
Well, and it's somewhat public, right? Like some of the information's public enough, and you can create. There's this many followers. So you times it by 10, or if it's above a certain amount, you times it by 20. And you can understand what generally somebody is getting. But I literally posted on the flight over here that wish lists do not equal sales. Period. It is a nuanced, challenging discussion, and it's a dance. It depends on where you got the wish list from, when you got it from, what is your velocity to market is a big important. How is that building over time? Because actually, the platform complements anyone that has a velocity that is increasing as you're going to market, and then it's a dance of getting to your launch moment and then converting people and converting them quickly enough so that the platform looks at your game and goes, yeah, this is doing well, let's serve it to more. Because that's what platforms are meant to do, and that's how it's designed. No one has a perfect idea of exactly what it does, and I doubt even Steam truly knows exactly how everything would be served. And so that's the thing, is you have to take your best guess based off of the knowledge and the data that you have, And so to say, oh, I have 100,000 wish lists, I'm going to convert it X percentage, it's BS. You can look at 100 different games and they're all different in many different ways. And so you have to really look at what your game is doing. And I think about it, we put out a game called Tomb Water, which is a 2D Souls-like Western from a two-person studio in Columbus, Ohio. So small indie game, and we didn't try to go mass market with it. We went after Souls-like audiences. And so we did a lot on Reddit. We were very strict with who we went to because we wanted it to convert. And the day it came out, there were 70 other games that came out that day. We were wishlist ranked 12th. And yet, we were one of I think 4 games that made the new and trending because what we did, we knew that despite having less wishlist than some others, we knew our wishlist would convert and that would push us up the ranking and move us past others. So understanding how this dance happens, even the timing of when you put out the game that day that you're coming out, it's so nuanced. You have to be in every little detail, and that's the challenge. Is people want to talk about this generally, and this is not a general discussion. It is about your individual game and every single nuance involved in it.
I want to change tack slightly, but I also want to tap the perspectives of our founders who have companies part of Game Design Future Lab. I would love to just ask you both the question, really, of what is it that you have learned in the process of trying to, raise funding for your game or studio that you wouldn't have expected? What has surprised you the most about that process? Whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I think when I was first starting, I found the metaphor that kind of looking for money and talking to investors and publishers is kind of going on dates and dating. You have to do a lot of research about who the other person is, what their interests are. I think as you were saying before, Matt, it's easy to go to a con and just kind of blow your game out to every single person. But what studios are you going to vibe with? Not just in terms of genre, not just in terms of check size, but also in terms of cultural fit. Are they into what it is you're trying to do, what your studio is trying to do? And then you also have to know how to bring your best foot forward. With CYBERLICH, the art we were able to market it pretty easily because the art really grabbed a lot of attention, but we didn't just rest on that. We used that to then go to conventions and put it in front of people to get live play testing. And then we took that and we would say to people there hey, there's no demo, but if you join our Discord, that's where we source more play testers so that we can refine the game and make the game work. And we're not just leaning on the art, we're not just leaning on the aesthetics, but we're building something holistic. And so you need to bring that to investors and publishers while also talking to them and figuring out if they're a good fit for you. Because I think sometimes as a developer, it's so easy to get caught up in the I just need to get funding no matter what, that it's easy to look past all of that. And these are gonna be long-term relationships that you're fostering. It's really important to get that stuff right. But if there's one thing I was really surprised by, it's just like dating. At some point, someone needs to make a move, and I'm terrible at that. And so to realize that you just at some point should say, what's your check size? What's your check size? Are you writing checks right now? And just move into that area where you're asking for an offer. Because I think for a long time, we were kind of hoping yeah, they see the potential. When are they gonna make an offer? And I guess I wish I'd been more proactive about that, but you live and learn,
Awesome. Krystel.
Yeah, for Munity, it's been really fun because Matthew mentioned how it's you go from easy to hard mode. We kind of went into nightmare mode because we're hey, what if we're a cooperative? And that's a financial structure that most people don't know how that works. How do we get financing? What does that look like? And how do we ensure our idea was we want to create a studio that is supporting its workers, right? We're seeing a mass wave of people being laid off. How do we ensure that this isn't something that's cyclical? So for us, it ended up being a lot less about how we were going to be approaching funders, and it was more about how do we talk about the solidarity economy? How do we incorporate ourselves with that? And one of the most fascinating things that we've learned with our partners as we've been working is there is this incredibly untapped network of people who are willing to help and almost willing to help for free. And it feels like a cult, which is really fun because we're just why is everybody so nice to us, right? But it's genuinely like this group of people who are interested in finding ways to connect you with people who might be able to purchase your game. And we're even on the other end, right? We're not looking to sell just a copy of a game. We're selling a whole arcade machine for our first game. So how do we make sure that we find places that want to put a machine in their place? We're not talking to just funders. We're talking to bar owners, right? We're creating these like personal relationships, and it really just is a matter of like, hey, somebody makes the first move, and we've been really lucky that our team, to the point of like, founders can't just be developers. We've been really lucky in the way that our co-op is structured, that we've sort of like tapped into everything that everybody can do, right? So like, I can focus on business stuff, Savannah can work on making sure that we make connections. We're having ways that we're talking to people, bringing in all of these people into it. And it's less about how to sell the game itself and more to how to sell us and like how do you build trust in us. So the most fascinating thing actually that we've learned is that it's not that hard to do investments in a cooperative. It's just the language just changes a little bit differently, but also that if we talk about it like films with people who are interested in impact investing, and changing the financial modeling that works for workers, you get a lot more hits, and it's been very fascinating.
Well, so two things off of that. I think firstly, like, I'm actually forgetting where the headline was, but I think, off the back of like the huge layoffs, somebody did an interview and the headline was like, the future of the industry needs to be worker-owned cooperatives, right? Like, we cannot keep working in these like same models that we've had for such a long time. So I think what you're doing is like really exciting in that regard. The other thing that you said, I think segues into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is, what are, especially for a studio in New York City, for instance, what are some like paths to financing that you may not think of, right? Like you mentioned, like leaning into people who are interested in like impact investing, right? Or talking to people who might be familiar with like the film model, and you're saying like, oh, this is what we're doing, we want to bring you into the space. I would love to hear from all of you about what you see as opportunities for New York City-based studios and the way that they could be pursuing financing, and what are the things to think about in New York City, obviously. Ben, I'll start with you.
Sure. So as being the Midwest person on the stage, talking about New York City funding, so like how I think about it is in the same way that how I found funding in the Midwest. 90% of the funding that we got is from the Midwest. And part of that is the story we told with what we were doing, how we were building, why we were doing what we were doing, was very related to where we were and what we were trying to do to challenge, to change. And that narrative is so incredibly important. When you're raising money and you're trying to get your game funded, your company funded, you're storytelling. You're telling about why you're doing what it is. And so thinking about that story and how it relates to the people you're talking to, and obviously like New York City has an incredible financial market. So like from a standpoint of people with money, awesome place. Look at less traditional places to go. Maybe not the games funds, which largely a lot of them are West Coast. But there's plenty of people that are interested in the space, and they just need something that relates to them, what they're doing, what they believe in. And if you can connect those dots, it gives you a chance to be able to unlock money that might have come from a non-traditional place. I think that's incredibly important right now, is getting creative with how you find dollars in. And it's something that I did a ton of because Wisconsin, the Midwest, is not known for investing in anything outside of healthcare, agriculture, and manufacturing. And here I am with a games company funded mainly by Midwest because of the story I told.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off that, so like the VC coming in 2016 and 2017 wasn't a coincidence. There was a narrative that they wanted to chase, which were things like Riot and Minecraft, right? They saw those things and they said, oh, billion-dollar companies, exits, like that's what we do. Let's go be part of that. But that was, somebody had to tell them that narrative. Like somebody had to pitch that to them in the first place. I think what you can do is in New York, to Ben's point, you have incredible access to finance and capital, and also the arts, right? And even in more than, say, in LA, which has been a traditional hub of that type of, finance, and also San Francisco or Seattle, in New York, you have the direct line to tons of people who are, again, getting younger, have grown up with games, are in finance, and just want to understand how they might be able to play in it. But you don't have to go with the same narratives of, hey, like it's going to be $1 billion exit. You can go with, hey, do you do real estate investing? Like this is how it's like real estate investing. Do you do film and media finance investing? This is how it's like film and media finance investing, et cetera, et cetera. You can create metaphors and narratives for people backed up by spreadsheets and actual projections that get people to understand what you're doing, what its potential is, and why it should be done here, right? So that's, I think, it's a really untapped potential in this city that I grew up in, and I look at it and I go, hey, every time I come here to visit, to come to something like this or visit my parents, I'm like, hey, there's definitely someone I could be visiting with, and I could be explaining to them, how game investing works. What I find happens often is that you'll be talking to someone about a studio and raising money. They'll get referred to somebody who works in, an adjacent financial area, and they don't know anything about games. And so what you're doing is having to go back and doing a 101 on what the games industry is. And I think the opportunity is to go and say, look, instead of like landing on someone's desk as a funding opportunity and they don't know anything about it, how can you step back and go, all right, how do I actually cultivate relationships with people who have access to capital, and then build that narrative with them? And then, that's going to take multiple touch points, but it can bear fruit. I've seen it myself.
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of high net worth individuals in New York City, right? Like, that's definitely.
And again, and younger who grew up with video games.
Yeah.
But I think it is hard. I mean, I think that, I had an investor the other day, Metal and General Tuition, we just raised a very large Series A. So another investor basically said, like, and we're not really a games content company, by the way. We're like a platform company, so it's not exactly the same. But basically, I was like, hey, talking about the race, et cetera. And he was like, oh, well, like, we just don't touch games. We don't understand it, right? Like, an investor is motivated mostly by fear. They want you to be a good custodian of their capital. If they don't understand the space, they won't give you their money. Why would you do that? You wouldn't. So it is a lot about education and finding the financial vehicles that understand the game space, understand where money can be made, understand when your business isn't one that's about making money, right? Like, I think that there's other options like crowdfunding and crowd equity that are like more about, hey, like, you're not in this because you're probably going to make a nice return or a good or a hurdle rate on your IRR. Like, you're here because you want to support maybe the arts, or you want to support this game, or maybe there's something else in it for you. And being able to pitch that and find those sources, I think, is also a really critical skill. There are also, on the financing side in games, a lot of people who have realized the venture capital model doesn't work and are trying to figure out different types of financing vehicles for games. I think one of the sad things is, like, in most businesses, like if you wanted to open a laundromat, you could go to the bank and you could get a bank loan to start your business. That typically does not happen for games, right? Because again, the bank doesn't understand gaming. They're not going to give you a loan because they understand what it takes to build a laundromat. But there are some other folks that are trying to do these kinds of vehicles, trying to set them up. And the games industry is only like 40 years old, right? And I think that will eventually over time change, right? Games started becoming big in like 1980s, right? So it's a younger market. It's starting to apex towards maturation. Some of those things are becoming a little bit more reliable. But at the end of the day, it's also a hits-driven business versus a reliably driven business like a laundromat could be. And there are some other, I think like from the financial perspective, there are people that are trying to work on this problem. I was talking to a couple folks the other day that were thinking about doing basically what the music industry does in terms of licensing your back catalog out for like a loan up front. So let's just say you happen to have a somewhat okay successful game. You're selling like a couple hundred units per month, et cetera. You sell out that for $2 million, right? They basically will eat at the table with you for the next forevermore, and they'll give you like a $2 million loan up front to go build your brand new IP that is not related to the sequel or the whatever of the original IP. So people are trying to puzzle out different models, but I would say it's gonna take a while for the finance side to catch up. Yeah.
They're catching up though. I mean, but that's a model that can work, right? There's debt that you talked about.
Yeah.
different types of project finance. Sometimes you present a project finance a deal to someone. I remember someone literally going, "Oh, this looks like a real estate deal. I get this." And so it's like, so again, not saying, "Hey, we're going to do this the same way, every time." How are there different ways people can actually make money? So you understand how to drive their interest. Again, you can be more creative, not only with your game, but with your deal terms.
Well, and I think what publishers have long realized is we suck at picking content. Like we know that in a way. Like that's why it's portfolio approach for many publishers is picking content is so tough. And where I think I'm seeing, to what is being said here, like project-based financing, and then what they're also doing is partnering with folks like us who will run the operations and support pieces, because it's not just the money that allows for success. In fact, arguably it's not the money that leads to success. I mean, look at some of the successful titles. Like it's not necessarily funding that got them successful, but support and being able to take something to market in a smart way, hitting the right audiences, and being able to partner around that, and being able to have a project financer partner with a more service-based publisher is a really interesting combo where it allows for the developer to retain their long-term value. It allows for the investor to de-risk their investment via support mechanisms, and it allows for the publishing service provider to have a de-risked model of providing these kinds of services that brings in revenue in a smarter way. And again, it goes to that more groups are working together to enable something like that to happen.
Okay, final parting words of wisdom it sounds like a lot of people in this room are in that position of wanting to raise financing of some kind. Quick one-liner from each of you. What is the thing that you would leave as your sort of parting wisdom? Matthew, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'll use mine to go over one other thing that I don't think we've kind of touched on but haven't dove into. Pre-existing communities really matter. And so if you can partner with someone who is looking to get into games for a specific reason that isn't necessarily only financial, right? They have an IP, they have a brand, they have like a purpose, they have, or they're just someone who has an audience. That can be another way to help guarantee success, because those communities typically, if you pick the right ones, will show up on day one and create that velocity that you need to win on the platform. So that's another thing, another tactic that I think you should think about if you're making a game. Is there something I can something I can align with this game that can create that momentum?
Amazing, Alex.
Maybe I'll tackle it more from the individual level. Do you have taste? Are you excellent at your craft? And are you more excellent at your craft than others are excellent at their craft? And do you love making games? Because what you're choosing to do will be very difficult in the environment you have now. If you do not love it, it'll just be hard. So that's what I will say.
Underrated advice.
Ben?
We are still, despite this AI and all of this technology that we are involved in, we are a relationship industry at the end of the day. And if you want to be able to succeed, a large piece of that is surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you in other areas in many ways. And it's all about building relationships, maintaining relationships. I talk with my team all the time around, we are bridge builders, and the stronger the bridge that we build, the more valuable it is over the longer period of time. And you have to maintain it, but it's all about relationships, and that's why events like this are so important, because you can network, meet people you had never met before, and that might unlock something that you never expected. And so making sure you put the effort into those relationships makes a world of difference.
On that note, this is actually a two-part sort of event. We have this panel, but then we're going to have a sort of breakout networking opportunity. You might have seen that on the schedule. So come through to the Guild Hall space and the space just outside it. All the panelists are going to be there for you to chat to. Grab your lunch and come as well, because I'm sure everyone's really hungry. But yeah, just definitely lean on that advice. That's definitely what
heated up perfectly.
What was that?
I keyed it up perfectly.
Yes, you did, absolutely. But also, I want to hear from Peter and Krystel. Like, what is one thing you're going through it? Like, what advice would you have?
I would say that as much as you want to work on your game, the business aspect is really, really important. So if you don't have the chops with business, make sure that you're finding somebody who's at least helping you, and don't be afraid to learn about that. It's incredibly, it's incredibly important to understand that you are your business, and the only person who can advocate for yourself is you, and once you find that community, it's going to be a lot easier. But trust in yourself a lot more than you think you do. I still don't, but that's okay. Don't do as I do, not as I say. Or the other way.
Peter.
I would second what Ben was saying about building relationships. Know what your strengths are and show those strengths off, and ask about check sizes. That's what I
Yeah, get cut to the questions.
You're not wasting your time or their time, you know?
Exactly. Well, and my piece of advice would be apply to the next cohort of the Game Design Future Lab.
Yes.
Applications are open now through August 7. We have a bunch of info out in the networking space, so hopefully we will see you there shortly. But thank you so much to our panelists. This was great. Huge topic. You all did amazing. Thank you. All right. Thank